When I want to know the real deal about what is happening with our military, I call on retired United States Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He is the go-to source for the analysis, for the experience, for the insight into why things are happening the way that they are. And with all of the latest information, just this kind of fire hose of details that are coming out concerning that September 2nd strike or strikes on that vessel in the Caribbean Sea, Pete Hegseth's role in it, Admiral Bradley. I mean, all of those details, we needed to really kind of hash them out and pull on the threads to be able to figure out more. And so without further ado, General Hertling. And joining me now, I have the privilege of an incredibly busy man's time. So when we do have the chance to hang out, I am so grateful. Retired General Mark Hertling, it is good to see you. How are you, General?
It is great, Katie. And I got to tell you, more than anybody else, I love talking to you because you are incredibly smart. You're a lawyer and you know what's going on. And it's fun to be with you too. You put some humor in some of the things that you ask.
Well, lately it's just been dark humor, I would say, General, is what we've been interjecting to be able to get by. But there really wasn't anybody else with whom I wanted to have this conversation because you do have the training and the experience to speak with wisdom and with measured respect for what is happening. And so instead of just knee-jerk reactions, emotional reactions, even though the latest news has engendered those emotional reactions, I kind of wanted to take stock by pulling on different threads with the latest developments concerning the Venezuelan boat strikes.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask you about them and to kind of look at them in pieces and compartmentalize them in some ways so that my viewers can have the benefit of your brilliance and your experience and they can have a better understanding of what's going on. And hopefully that works out okay.
It does, but I wouldn't go so far as saying brilliant, but I'll take whatever compliment I can get from you.
Well, I'm doling them out. So there we go. So General Hertling, let's start with one of the latest bits of news, which is the Secretary of Defense. I refuse to call him the Secretary of War. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is now weighing whether he will release publicly the video of that now infamous September 2nd double tap or the strike, which actually, frankly, sir, was 4 strikes on one vessel in the Caribbean Sea. But your thoughts about the value of releasing to the American public that September 2nd video of that vessel strike or strikes?
Yeah, I think it would be very important for everyone to see this, Katie. And I normally don't say something like that. And I'll tell you why. In the
Yes, sir.
military, sometimes, in every single drone or attack where there's an observation post or some kind of observance, it basically provides you with a film or the technology that shows you exactly what happens. And it's usually not very pleasant. And in fact, there's a slang expression that sometimes we use in the military called war porn. It's the looking at something that gives a feeling of, oh my gosh, look at this murder, a killing, not murder, killing of other people. Having spent a couple of years in combat myself, we were privy to drone feeds. We were privy to aircraft feeds of strikes on targets. AH-64 Apaches would have their own feed, their gun camera tapes, and anything that was out there that you could feed into an operations center where sometimes senior leadership can see what's happening. That's always occurring usually with the special operations forces when they go in for a strike. We saw that during the Obama days when you had, the president and all of his national security team huddled around a television set that was actually showing the bin Laden raid. I mean, this is relatively new technology over the last 20 years where leaders that are 5,000 miles away can actually see what's going on. And they can sometimes apply another military piece of slang. It's called the 1,000-mile screwdriver, where they can adjust things from, hundreds of miles away in terms of what's going on. Well, that seemed to be the case in this particular incident where Secretary Hegseth was viewing a video. Admiral Bradley was controlling the fight from, as I understand it, Fort Bragg North Carolina, which is where some of the special operations, or the JSOC headquarters is. The Joint Special Operations Command is JSOC. And he was the commander of that organization at the time, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. And the reason I bring that up, stop me if I'm getting too deep into this and peeling back an onion.
Please keep going.
Admiral Bradley, at the time of the September 2nd strike, was a 3-star admiral, vice admiral, in charge of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command. He's been with that organization for years as both a SEAL and as a commander of underling organizations to JSOC, and now he's the commander as a 3-star. Well, since that strike, he has now taken command of Special Operations Command and been promoted to 4-star general from an Army general by the name of Fenton. And so General Fenton is retiring. I think he maybe already has retired, or if not, by the end of this month. Was in the SOCOM position when Admiral Bradley was the JSOC commander. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because you've probably not heard the name General Fenton in all this. He's a player as well, because he's monitoring what's going on too in these kind of boat strikes from one of his subordinate commanders. The other thing I'd bring up is this was the first strike. And the reason that's important is because anytime you have the first action on some kind of new target, there's usually a little bit of feeling your way through it.
Sure.
And we're seeing that is exactly what happened. Now, before I go any further, I've been pretty adamant when I've appeared on cable TV talking about this term double strike or double tap.
Yes, sir.
A double tap is a special operations term, which means when SEALs or Rangers or Delta Force goes into a target and they stumble onto a target that tries to raise a gun or tries to assault them, they conduct what's called a double tap. It's their normal way of shooting a rifle at a target. 2 shots rapidly, and usually in the head. These guys are so good that they can counter any kind of threat to them when it's a man-on-man, soldier-on-soldier situation. That is not what occurred on September the 2nd. It was not a double tap. It was a single strike against a boat using, Admiral Bradley described it in his conference the other day with congressmen as I think he said a GBU-39, which is a type of bomb being delivered by normally a drone. So you had the one strike, and then it destroyed part of the boat, killed 9 of the 11 people on the boat, from what I understand, although I didn't see the film, dumped a lot of the cargo into the sea, which allegedly was cocaine. It was a boat that was heading not toward the United States, which has been the Trump administration's mantra on this. If it had been headed to the United States, that kind of boat would have had to refuel about 6 times between where they were and the shores of the United States. So that takes away the adjective of imminent threat. It was not an imminent threat. And there are so many disconnects between what the administration and what Secretary Hegseth is saying versus what I know occurs in these kinds of operations. Now, truthfully, I don't know the details of this operation. I'm not a SEAL. I'm not a special operator. I'm a conventional force tanker, but I've seen these kind of strikes before. I know what goes into them. And I also know when an organization is conducting these strikes, that there's someone taking a log and writing down on a log of every single event that occurs and any dialogue that occurs between the events. So if I'm in an operational headquarters and I'm monitoring this strike and giving orders, there's someone taking notes in an operational log or typing on a computer. Hey, at 11 or 1:11 p.m., 13:11 p.m., General Hertling told us to strike. At 13:12, the missile hit the crew. indications are devastating effects. At 11:15, two people nearby not killed, hanging onto the boats. 11:17, call for another strike. This is something that everything is recorded by someone taking notes or even an audio. I don't know what they had, if they had a note taker or an audio feed, probably both for this kind of a fight. And you also have when things were launched. So there's a lot of detail on this. The president said over the weekend, when asked, should he release the tape? Yeah, sure. Go ahead and release the tape. Secretary Hegseth was asked at the Reagan Security Conference, are you going to release the tape? He said, well, we have to sanitize it. We have to make sure it's been, filtered. So there's no TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures that are given away. These are the things of what he said at the Reagan Security. It's been 3 months since this happened. So if it hasn't been sanitized already, or if it hasn't been reviewed already, which is what I know they do in the Pentagon or in any operational headquarters, I don't know when the hell they're going to do it. So I'll stop there. That's a long explanation of what is occurring right now in a counter-narcotics operation.
Well, it's incredibly beneficial, and this is exactly the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you. So I have a few threads that I want to pull with you right now from what you said. Number one, the fact that Admiral Bradley, or at the time Vice Admiral Bradley, was in Fort Bragg and Pete Hegseth was located somewhere else, in and of itself is not unusual, correct?
That's not unusual at all. Yeah, happens all the time.
What about the details that have been released from Pete Hegseth?
Let me give you an example of that.
Sure.
Admiral McRaven, who was the Special Operations Command commander, was in Afghanistan during the bin Laden strike, waiting for the SEAL team to come back from the strike so he could debrief it. It was such an important mission. 5,000 or 8,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., you had the entire national security team and the primaries of the president, SecDef, SecState, and everybody else watching in that famous picture in the Situation Room. So you can see how something like this might be held in a different kind of context.
The reason why I asked, though, is Secretary Hegseth, by his own admission, has said the following, that he, in real time, was watching the initial strike. We now know that there was a total of 4 strikes. The first one, as you have explained, did monumental damage to the vessel itself and killed 9 of the 11 occupants of the vessel. 2 survivors clinging to the debris managed to get on top of the debris, and they were waving their hands. And then there was the expiration of approximately 45 to 48 minutes from that first strike to then the subsequent 3 more strikes, a second, third, and fourth strike to be able to destroy the vessel and to kill the 2 survivors from the initial strike. According to Secretary Hegseth, he did not witness the survivors. He did not witness the subsequent strikes. He alludes to and calls it, quote, the fog of war in a very insulting manner, suggesting that the media doesn't understand the military and how the military works. But the fact that Secretary Hegseth is now saying that Admiral Bradley made the decision to do the second, third, and fourth strikes suggests that he wants to hang Bradley out to dry, assuming arguendo it was not legal, even though they're claiming that OLC has said that this is all kosher legally. The fact that he's leaving Admiral Bradley out to dry is not something that you would agree with, correct, General?
No, not at all. In fact, it's not the military approach to things. There's something to, Katie, I'll add to our conversation, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I'm not sure some of my cable TV hosts quite understand this, but you have to look at something that's called commander's intent. And in this case, Secretary of Defense is a commander. He's in the chain of command team, as is the president. So what they want to happen isn't necessarily provided in just an order.
Sure.
It can be provided in speaking, written documents before the strike, how they want the military to operate, what their expectations are. That's commander's intent. So allegedly, according to reports, Admiral Bradley, during last Friday's discussion with key members of Congress, said that he was never given a no quarters order by the secretary, which means no quarters. If you see someone dead, lying on the battlefield, kill them anyway. It doesn't matter if they
Sure.
have weapons or can counter
Or
your
not.
action. He was never given that order. He was given an order from what I've read on his testimony to destroy the terrorists or kill the terrorists on the boats, destroy the boats, eliminate the drugs that are on board that boat. Now,
Sounds pretty clear to me.
that is clear to me too, but it's also not something you normally do with criminals. We'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
He's telling them, kill everybody on board, sink the boat, destroy the drugs. That's the commander's intent. Now, how Admiral Bradley executed that intent by ordering another strike or getting another missile fired at the boat is how he does it as a commander. But when you have the preliminary orders to do certain things, that makes up part of commander's intent. The other part of commander's intent is all the speeches we've been hearing Secretary Hegseth give since he's become Secretary of Defense. Don't worry about those silly rules of engagement. You're the War Department. You're not the Defense Department. What was the third one I was going to point out? I want people being lethal, and we want lethality over legality. Don't get caught up in all these legal terms or the rules of engagement. So all of that, in my view, Katie, as a former commander, contributes to what the commander's intent is. And if I'm a commander, I'm thinking, ooh, this is getting really dangerous. We're getting pretty close to the edge. So in my view, as a former commander, listening for commander's intent, Secretary Hegseth cannot divorce himself from this entire situation just by saying Admiral Bradley was the one that pulled the trigger.
How does it further complicate the analysis then when you are making a decision? And I want to give people the benefit of the doubt in the midst of everything that is occurring. But you have two survivors that are standing or, sitting in some capacity on the debris. It's smoldering by all accounts, and they're waving their arms. And everybody who was at this congressional briefing, General, said it looked like they were waving at the American aircraft. Some saying it looked like they were asking for help, as it appeared that they were stranded. The vessel was not able to operate anymore. There was no risk that the vessel itself is going to be functional or operable anymore. How does it complicate things then if Admiral Bradley, having heard and interpreted commander's intent from Secretary Hegseth, because we know that Hegseth said for it to be lethal. Lethal is kind of like the warrior ethos now for the Department of Defense. But now Bradley is saying, well, you know what? The commander's intent is very clear to me. And so even with the two men waving their arms as survivors, I'm going to blow the ship out of the water, destroy the cargo, and destroy the people that are on the debris.
Yeah. Okay. You want to get deeper into this now?
Yes.
Let's go further into personalities. For the last 20 years, guys like Admiral Bradley, General Fenton, everybody else in the special operations community has been going after individual terrorists. And having special operations forces under my command, or not under my command, but in my area of operation the last time I was in Iraq, they think in terms of either capturing or killing terrorists. And in fact, every night I would get a report saying, here's what's going on tonight. Here's the targets we're going after. Muhammad, somebody or other, they're going to hit them at 2:00 in the morning. And we're going to report back to you either jackpot or dry hole. Okay. Those are the two terms that the special operators use. Jackpot means they either captured or killed the guy. Dry hole means he wasn't there.
Gotcha.
But when you're talking about going one-on-one with a SEAL team against an individual terrorist in close-in fights, you're in a close-in fight. So you can kill them, they can kill you. So you're either going to do that or capture them, which to get the information and the intelligence and all that. That is the context of what special operators have been doing for the last 20 years. Now we're bombing boats. This is something new. And let me add one more thing to this, just to put it in context, is this was the very first strike. So if you're these 11 guys on this drug boat and suddenly something falls out of the sky and blows you up, and you're one of two survivors, you don't know what happened. There haven't been other boats being blown up where you go, hey, I better not go out there. I'm deterred from going. This was the first one. So I could contend that those two guys that were trying to crawl on top of this upturned boat or turn it over, who have just been hit and watched 9 of their buddies being killed, they don't know what the hell's going on. That's my conjecture, Katie. I'm putting some words into this, but you look at the entirety of the situation, and it's more complicated than Senator Cotton says.
Oh God.
You know, this is not.
They were radioing for help, and they were going to pose more of a threat.
Yeah. And this is what will come out of all of the testimony, not just from Admiral Bradley, but likely from General Fenton, likely from all of their lawyers, likely from the special operators that were pulling the trigger, likely from the drone operator. And I'll add one more to this whole bunch, likely from from Admiral Halsey, the commander of Southern Command. Now, where does he play in? Okay, Admiral Halsey is the commander of Southern Command, which takes all of the area of Latin and South America and the waters surrounding it. He's the guy that owns the battle space, what we call it in the military. When special operators come into that battle space, they coordinate everything with him. He's the guy that owns the space. He doesn't have to agree with what's going on, but he needs to know about it. Well, interestingly enough, after the first couple of these strikes, we hear reports of both Admiral Halsey and his lawyer having contentious conversations with Secretary Hegseth.
That's right.
I don't know what those are about. I might suspect that they're about how they're applying the rules of engagement and legal issues when they're striking drug boats in his area of operation. Because truthfully, just like I was responsible, and I'll tell you a quick story, I was responsible for what special operators did in my area. He's responsible for the same thing. And by the way, one other point that we can't miss. The President of the United States, I think it was 2 days after Secretary Hegseth announced that Admiral Halsey would be retiring,
yes,
also made the announcement that there were CIA operatives inside of Venezuela.
That's right.
So again, if I'm a battle space commander, all of these things are happening. If I don't agree with them, I should get a say, and my lawyer should get a say about the legalities of all this. Now, the example I'm going to give you, a quick war story from me.
Sure.
When I was in Iraq in 2007 and 8, every night, special operators under the command of either General McChrystal or Admiral McRaven, they were the two JSOC commanders that I was working with, would go into my area of operations to target individuals who they knew to be Al-Qaeda terrorists. On one occasion, they went in to capture a guy. They gave me his name. My intelligence officer said that he wasn't quite clear on this is a guy they were really going after or somebody else because we weren't clear on the intelligence. And yet the special operators went in. When they went into this building to kill him or to capture him, he was next to a bed, or he was sleeping. It was 2:00 in the morning. He rose up, grabbed his AK-47 that was nearby the bed. So the special operators double tapped, killed him because they saw him as a threat. Ready for this? It was the wrong guy. And not only that, it was the son of the governor of Saladin province, whose other son had been killed by terrorists, whose wife had been killed by terrorists, and he was a former Ba'athist. And for the previous 9 months, I had tried to co-opt him to get on the side of the Iraqi government. That next morning, when I was told that they got the wrong guy and the double tap of his son was remarkably still in the bedroom, if you know what I mean. There was blood everywhere, brain matter everywhere. As the battle space commander, I had to go to that governor and tell him what happened and offer him the salacia payment of $25,000. That was one of my worst days in combat. And it was because it was my battle space. None of my guys did anything wrong. It was the special operators that hit the wrong target. But that's the kind of effect you have in terms of these kinds of operations.
You know, a few minutes ago, you spoke about how Admiral Bradley was 3-star at the time of this September 2nd strike, which is the first of the 22 known strikes that have happened so far. And then subsequent, he's now been made a 4-star. Is there a suggestion that he's been rewarded then for kind of going along with it? Or this is just something that was normal progression for him to become 4-star?
Yeah, it's normal procession, the progression, excuse me.
Sure.
Normally, the JSOC commander becomes the SOCOM commander. And I think on the 2nd of September, he was already told that he was going to take command. In fact, I'm sure of it. He knew he was going to take command from General Fenton in about a month.
So, you know, General, I did a video on my YouTube channel here a few days ago, and it spoke about how the red flags were already kind of in place from the very beginning of this year in January when it came to Hegseth, putting aside that absurd calling in of all the admirals and the generals that you and I spoke about at length about before here. But I was focusing on the JAG Corps. You know, Hegseth and this guy, Tim Parlatore, who was a personal lawyer for Donald Trump, they've basically dismantled what used to be the JAG Corps that you knew. And they've now been rebuilding and remaking the JAG Corps in their own eyes, right? And there are some media reports, General, that there was some contemporaneous JAG Corps advice being provided. I kind of wanted to lean into you and your experience about the JAG Corps giving legal advice when these things are going on, because I feel like, yes, there may be a memo that the Office of Legal Counsel created that gives you cover legally up and down the chain of command when it comes to whether these, I think they're extrajudicial killings are happening. But you know, how important is it to have a JAG Corps that is honoring the rule of law and not just being yes men and yes women to give you the legal analysis that's going to give you the legal cover to do what otherwise could be not legal?
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit, Katie, because of the staff judge advocates, the SJAs, or the JAG Corps senior officers in each one of the services. There have been 2 out of the 4 that have been relieved. The Army and the Air Force, the 3-star JAGs. The other ones have been reduced in rank to 2-star.
Right. So that they can't be in some of the rooms. I gave the analysis. They can't be in some of the rooms where some of the most sensitive information is also being discussed, sir.
Correct. But they are still in the commands, and they are still offering professionally their advice to the commanders. You know, it's interesting from the standpoint of a JAG, just like a chaplain. They serve 2 professions. They not only serve the profession of arms, the military, but they also serve the profession of law and the profession of ministry, like the chaplains do, and doctors do it for the medicine when they're wearing the uniform as well. So they're they have 2 professional ethos that they're following. I would suggest that every JAG that's still in position within different command structures are still giving very valid advice. The question is, how is that being interpreted, and how is not only the commander taking that advice or overriding it, because that's what commanders do. You can override it if you think there's a legal aspect that the JAG isn't getting, or is it being overridden by the general counsel within the Department of Defense, which is a civilian lawyer? So again, this is much more complicated than what is breaking across the news cycle.
Which is why this is the type of insight that I appreciate. Before you and I part ways, General, there's something
Can I tell you one more thing about this, Katie, by the way?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
Back in the early days of Afghanistan and Iraq, there was a perfect example of this, because the general counsel in the Department of Defense was pushing hard for waterboarding and torture. And both the JAGs of the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps all say, no, we're not doing that. That's a war crime. We don't torture people. And it actually pushed them to the point where they pushed the decision-making over to the CIA. And the CIA finally said, yeah, we'll do the waterboarding. So no military officers or no military units did waterboarding that I'm aware of it was all conducted by various CIA cells at black sites. Not to put blame on them, it's just that their lawyers saw it differently.
Well, yeah, and that kind of speaks to the convenience, though, I think sometimes of how that fits with what your ultimate mission is, right? I mean, and that does, again, speak to, and actually, it's a perfect segue to my last question to you, which is this. You and I often speak about the ethos of the military, right? Like, what is your opinion then, sir, on how all of this collectively is weighing on the members of our military? Because there is a very huge, very public outcry, also from members of Congress, for example, right, that are saying that a lot of this stuff isn't right. The word murder is being used, sir. And, you know, a lot of just Americans may support, quote, the war on drugs, but this is not sitting well with a lot of Americans. And I'm sure internationally we're being perceived in a way, which is, for example, Great Britain, they're not giving us some of the intel anymore, right? They don't want to get their hands dirty, literally have blood on their hands when it comes to these things. But I wanted to know from you how this is impacting our members of the military, because sometimes it's a reflection, unfairly or fairly, of kind of how people are perceiving the military in all branches as a whole.
Um, my take, Katie, and it's a great question because it's creating a sense of distrust from the American public toward the military. But I'll run the counter argument saying the military is standing firm. They are being very careful. They're anxious, to be sure. They are bending, but I don't think you're going to see the military break. And I think this this entire episode is going to cause some people really to take notice, especially if there are folks who are going to take the heat for it. And there will be military officers that will take the heat for these strikes when it comes before public opinion. What you said is very important. There's a big percent of our society that's saying, hey, we don't like drugs, so let's kill them all. I mean, I'm seeing that every day on social media, but it's a crime. And the other thing that's important to recognize, and I'll give you another personal experience I had when I was a one-star general. I got to go on a Coast Guard cruiser off the coast of Key West where they were intercepting human trafficking and drug boats. And they are masterful at how they do this. And in fact, I was glad to see it yesterday. There was a film posted on X, I think it was, where it showed a Coast Guard helicopter flying out to a drug boat because these things are going as fast and Coast Guard cutters can't keep up with them. They would launch helicopters with a sniper leaning out the door and shoot out the engine. I saw that up close and personal. I saw another film on it yesterday on YouTube. That's the way to conduct these kind of operations.
It's an interdiction. You capture
the criminal, you take the drugs, you try him in court. The criminal will give you more information as a mule. What he's carrying gives you more information about the rat lines of the drug targeting. It may even lead back to the mastermind, the cartel leader. You don't just bomb boats with mules in them that are taking drugs. 22, we've bombed, I think 22 or 23 boats now. Allegedly, there's over 80 people that were killed. None of that was necessary, in my view. You could have captured all of those people, put them in jail, find out where they were coming from, find out more intelligence, capture the drug as opposed to sinking it, and not having this kind of public divisiveness between what the military is doing and what a lot of Americans think they should do.
Point of personal privilege, 3 things. 1, we presume, absent evidence, that all of the 87 civilians that have been killed were narco-terrorists. We have no evidence of that as of right now because there's no transparency. Number 2, if we were to interdict and to prosecute, that would not be consistent with the Trump administration's way that they've been handling things in the criminal justice system. And 3, and lastly, I think the most important, the hypocrisy is rank. You'd pardon Juan Orlando Hernandez, the drug kingpin himself, the former Honduran president who facilitated the importation of 400 tons plus of cocaine into the United States, which killed countless Americans. We'll pardon him if you're Donald Trump, but we will kill you if you are a mule. I prosecuted these cases with Haida.
No, you did.
As a specialized prosecutor for a while. And trust me, I understood the value of the mule, the value of the information on a flip, and what I could do with somebody like that. General Mark Hertling, as always, I have overstayed my welcome with the privilege of your time, but these are the important conversations that our viewers need to hear because they need to understand really how the balance is in terms of the way we're supposed to be processing the information that we're getting. So I appreciate you always for your patience and for your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Always. Thanks. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.